Here we go then, one of the big rivalries of 2015. It's M3 versus C63. Let's try them on circuit and find out which one's fastest. This is the more powerful S version of the C63. It has 503 brake horsepower and costs just under £67,000. The M3 is £11,000 cheaper and it gives up almost 80 brake horsepower to the C63. Let's start in the M3 and remind ourselves what these cars are like on track. I've driven a handful of M3s and M4s on circuit, and they really do perform well when it's dry. In the wet, just like on the road, they can be a complete handful, but we've got a bone-dry track today and the car feels really sharp. It really does feel good around here. The first thing you notice, well, the very first thing you notice is the seating position. It's spot on. The seat is so low in the car, wheel all the way at your chest. It's absolutely perfect. And then you notice that incredible front axle grip. It's amazing how sharply the car gets in towards the apex, and it will just hold its line so well. And then after the turn-in phase, it's got enormous mid-corner grip. And then in these dry conditions, certainly good traction as well. You really can pile on the throttle and it will put the power down and just get away from the corner down the next straight. So the chassis feels stable, it feels well controlled. It doesn't feel like it's being upset by undulations as it is on the road. It's so flat here, you just don't have to worry about that. It has, in fact, none of the issues that you have on the road in terms of control. It feels so stable, so secure. It's an enormous amount of fun, this car on track. You could just go around all day long. This car's got the optional carbon ceramic brakes. They're £6,000. Can you really justify £6,000 on one option? I reckon if you're doing track work, then you really should get them. They're so good. Yeah, after a few laps, the pedal does go a bit soft. But you basically have really good, really stable braking lap after lap. Again, the Mercedes is going to struggle to match this car under braking because it's much heavier and it's just got cast iron brakes. This engine, this 6-cylinder twin turbo engine, it's got really, really sharp throttle response. And it pulls hard, it does pull hard, but at the top end, this particular car, it's got 1,200 miles on it. I think it feels a bit strangled. It doesn't rev all the way out to the red line like it should do. I think it'll free up with a few miles, but at the moment, just there, it just feels a bit strangled. This MDCT gearbox, it's perfect on circuit. You get quick down changes just when you want them, and the upshifts are quick as well. Something like a 911 GT3 or a 458 Speciale, their gearboxes are slightly quicker than this one. They're almost in the next gear before you finish putting the pedal. This isn't quite like that, but it's very, very good nonetheless. Yeah, this M3, it really is at its best on a dry, flat circuit like this one. It comes alive. It's a great deal of fun. I'm going to be quite surprised, I have to say, if that heavier, slightly lazier Mercedes feels as sharp as this car. But it's got a lot more power, a lot more torque, so perhaps it'll still be quicker. Let's find out. That exhaust noise, is it coming through? I hope so, because it's a big part of what makes this car a lot of fun. We were worried, weren't we, that this switch across the industry to turbocharging and downsizing would kill engine sounds. Well, this C63 I reckon gives us some reassurance that we can still enjoy the way that cars sound. It's not the same wonderful, joyous sound as the old 6.2 litre normally aspirated V8. It's a slightly contrived, slightly tricked up exhaust sound, but it's still fun, it still sounds cool. One of the first things you notice in the C63 is the seating position. It's just a little bit too high. You want the seat to go another 2 or 3 inches lower. The BMW does better it in that respect then, but it's the kind of thing that you think about once, and when you start driving quickly, you completely forget about it. We've got 510 horsepower here versus 430 in the M3. And a whole load more torque in the Mercedes as well. It does feel quicker. In fact, it feels outrageously quick in a straight line. It pulls so hard. The engine needs about 3,500 RPM before it really starts hauling. The BMW's engine gets going a fraction sooner than that, but once this thing starts pulling, it really does go, and it's got a frantic top end as well. Although the BMW has got slightly sharper throttle response. When you're exiting a corner in this Mercedes, you do notice that there's a very slight hesitation before the power starts to come in. The gearbox is also fractionally slower, fractionally duller. There's not a great deal in it. We've got a single clutch conventional auto in this car rather than a twin clutch gearbox. It works pretty well, it's just not quite as instant as the BMWs. We're carrying a shed load more weight in this Mercedes. It's about 100 kilograms. And you can just about feel it. The car doesn't have the same incredible front axle grip. We're running the same Michelin Pilot Supersport tyre, but the BMW just makes slightly better use of it in terms of turn-in and mid-corner grip. That BMW's also got slightly better traction than this Mercedes. That might be a torque issue rather than a chassis thing, but even so, this Mercedes does put the power down pretty well. There's no slack in the C63's steering, and I like the weight as well. It's really natural weighting, but it doesn't give you a great deal of information as to what the front axle is up to. You kind of know you're understeering because you hear it and you feel the whole chassis sliding out, rather than the steering giving you those fine detailed messages. The BMW, it's not a great deal better, but I think its steering is just slightly sharper. As is the whole chassis, it's just slightly better locked down. Whereas the Mercedes will do that, will snap into sudden oversteer at mid-corner. The BMW just feels slightly more locked down. So this C63 is quicker down the straights, but I don't think it carries quite as much speed into the apex. And then when you get on the power, it will slip into oversteer just a little bit sooner. So it's brute force versus precision. Which will win out around a lap of the Bedford Autodrome? Let's find out.
With Richard Meaden at the wheel, we're across the line. Both cars get to the apex of the first corner together, but the C63 suffers a big spike of oversteer at corner exit. The M3 creeps ahead by 1/10 of a second. The M3's cleaner exit from the hairpin helps it to carry more speed towards the chicane. By the entry, it's 2/10 ahead. It's actually the M3 that's more ragged in the quick, long left-hander, but the Mercedes gets loose in the right-hander that follows. At the start of the S-bend, the BMW is ahead by another 1/10. Both cars slide a little at the exit of the right-hander, but the BMW carries more speed and it pulls away by another 1/10. It now leads by 4/10 of a second with half the lap to run. Both cars get through the hairpin cleanly and accelerate towards the second chicane. At the exit, the gap is still 0.4 seconds. The M3 is tidier through the quick left-hander, but watch how much oversteer the Mercedes gets in the final corner. The M3 crosses the line in 1 minute 23.3 seconds, the C63 1 minute 24 dead. There wasn't much between the two cars for most of the lap, but that massive oversteer moment in the final corner cost the Mercedes 0.3 seconds. The deficit at the end of the lap was 7/10. Despite giving up 80 brake horsepower and 110 pounds-foot of torque, the lighter, more agile M3 beats the C63 by a convincing margin. It had better traction away from the slow corners and was much neater in the quick stuff, suffering less time-sapping oversteer than the Mercedes. The new C63 is much more capable on track than the previous model, but the M3 is still the one to beat. Remember to subscribe to the Evo YouTube channel for more Deadly Rivals videos.